What's up, guys? You're about to see a clip, but it's not from my stream. This is from some good friends of mine, Zach and Art from the Intercut podcast. I recently did a full hour with them. I'll put a link to that episode in the info box. Definitely check it out. But this is just a little section where we were talking about elevated horror, and I couldn't resist. I was like, this would be perfect to show you guys on the channel, and definitely throw them a sub too. Those guys, they're very knowledgeable about not just horror but like movies in general, and it's always fun hanging out with them. Really great production over there too. They put a lot into the content, but yeah, definitely check them out, and also enjoy the clip, guys. Thanks for watching.
Lee, so we talked a bit about all the different horror movies that are exciting us right now, but is there like a certain type of horror movie that you get the most excited about? Is it this sort of more like metaphor-laden horror films that sort of are in the mold of like a Get Out? Jordan Peele's a filmmaker I definitely should have mentioned earlier. Is it the more like comedic leaning stuff like your Abigail's, or is it the studio horror movies, or is it those like nasty little VOD films that seem to emerge from nothing and then leave a lasting impression on you?
I think, for lack of a better word, I know we use that word elevated horror, but
Bro,
I
was about to ask you about that, so please go in, because that was going to be my question.
Well, yeah, I'll mention elevated horror in a sec, but I'll say, you know, Neon and A24, they keep me coming back. As soon as I see a horror movie under those two studios, I'm already interested. And when Longlegs, you know, that's one I've anticipated for most of the year. And then when I saw it, when I walked out of the theater, I was like, this is going to be divisive. But most of those, you know, A24, Neon, and you could pick a couple other studios, they tend to have divisive audiences anyway. I already know that some people, you know, elevated horror, it's not going to be for everybody. And in the horror community, I don't know if you know this, Art, but there's people, they do get offended by the word elevated horror, which I don't
get
understand.
offended.
You would get offended?
Feel like I get furious. my blood boils. I understand the pet peeve of the word, because I feel like it's saying that until these directors came, the rest of horror was trash. And it's like, I feel like
that's a good point.
Right, it looks down at slashers like they can't have something that approaches that or the like. But like you were mentioning, you know, there are directors who love horror and are here for it. And then there may be directors who come in because their last film wasn't good, so they try to dip into horror before leaving it. They're like Miley Cyrus twerking before she says, I don't want to twerk no more. And they use the genre. And I feel like the elevated horror element of it is this idea that this is appropriate horror. I'm not watching a crappy genre. This is the good ones from the genre.
Yeah, I'm not some gory slasher. I'm smarter than that.
I felt like that's the take that a lot of elevated horror kind of approached.
That's the unspoken part.
Yeah, this is the good MCU movie, not the bad MCU movie. And it makes, I feel like it almost puts a blanket over a lot of the genre.
This is the Sony Marvel movie, not the MCU movie.
Yeah, it's in association with.
Yeah. I wonder what like Joe and Jane Sixpack think of or do they even know the term elevated horror? You know?
Nah, it's marketing.
It's an interesting debate to have, because I look at it as a category, and I never looked at it as an offensive word. And maybe that's because I love it all. You know, to me, a good horror movie is a good horror movie. But I guess I could see how some people, they might feel like somebody's trampling on the lower fare type stuff. Yeah, I never looked at it like that.
Yeah. Well, I feel like elevated horror is like a useful term to sort of distinguish what a certain type of horror movie, while the term itself might not be like the most appropriate given the things that Art said about it. But there certainly is like a type of movie that is the elevated horror movie. And a lot of those, as you mentioned, are the ones that we get from A24 or Neon. And they're these more prestige feeling films that maybe have a quieter pace to them, but still are horror movies, even if they're not like wall-to-wall blood or gore or anything like that. I agree with you, Lee, in that those are probably the ones that generally I find the most interesting. I like the whole, like, it's a metaphor for trauma or whatever if it's well told enough. But you know, the thing is, like, there is just so much stuff emerging from so many places, and I found myself really getting the most excited by these very like artsy indie horror takes and your stuff, your Skinamarink, or this year I really liked In a Violent Nature, and I know that those films might test the patience of maybe your average horror fan, but I just find them to be like really bold in their rejection of what came before it in some ways. They're charting their own path too.
I think it's a generational thing, because I think if you didn't have studios, these newer studios like A24 and Neon, I think the generation, the movement itself created the word, you know, and I think younger audiences that like not just horror from it, because A24, they don't do just horror, they just do thought-provoking films. And I think movie fans in general like some of us, we like thought-provoking films. You guys love thought-provoking films, and I think you guys, you have a wide palette of taste in terms of movies. You like horror, you like drama, you like even comedies, even superhero type stuff. Sometimes. And to me, if I see a director that has a distinct vision, you could tell that he's very motivated and he wants to put out the best product that he can. It doesn't matter the genre, and I think we're in a new age. I really think we're in a new age with these studios that have they have little factions of fans. A24, they have their horror fans, but they also have their non-horror fans. And I think it all kind of meshes together, and maybe that's what created the word. I don't know. I've always been interested in how the word was created. Where did it come from? First time I heard it was like Scream 5, but I think when they said it in Scream 5, I thought it was, I chuckled at it because she was talking about A24 and Hereditary and all that. And I was like, I get that. I completely, like, it fits. But what Art was saying does hold some true, because when you start putting a scale on it, like this type of horror movie is far better than the scum, the dirty type horror movies. But so in that sense, you're right, Art. But I think it's a generational thing. I don't think that word would have existed if not for these newer studios, newer filmmakers.
Would you not say The Shining is elevated horror?
I would. I actually would say The Shining is elevated horror.
The Omen. I feel like you're saying, it's the people who use it don't mean it in a bad way, and that's, we know we live in America 2024. Yeah. That's where it gets twisted, where people are using a word that people may find offensive because they think you're judging my tastes, when in reality it's the new subgenre of horror. Can it be thought-provoking, or is it exhilarating because it's like you're just out in the woods, who can survive? Right. It's not survival horror. Yeah. It's metaphorical horror, like Zach was saying. I remember it during the Babadook. That's like when it really started rising up. That led to what you're mentioning. Right. That intro of Scream 5, where they mention it as being elevated horror. And I think where it ends up becoming a thing is that when you put labels on things, those labels end up inverting themselves, because now those movies were just good movies that were horrors. A label was put on them. So now you have filmmakers 10 years in the game with that genre in their head, making elevated horror, and that's where it comes off a little weird. Now that they're kind of self-aware of the word, it's not as good as the movies that actually caused that term to be out there, in my opinion. Totally.
Yeah, that's a good point. I kind of look at it too as, like, if you look in the music world, especially like, say, rock and metal. I mean, metal alone has, let's just go ahead and say 25, 30 different subgenres of metal, and those guys fight amongst each other constantly. So when you compare that world to like the movie world, and then go even deeper to like the horror world, if the only thing we're fighting about is one word, elevated, then it's not so bad, because again, in the like the rock world, the metal world, everybody gets offended by everything. It's kind of silly, and it's ironic because of how tough they seem. Right. But yeah, you don't. For the most part, in horror, it seems like the community itself is very loving and they inviting of each other. And even when I do see little debates about elevated horror, it usually ends with kind of a chuckle or laugh. It's not like I'm not really offended by it, but it is interesting to discuss because of this day and age. Again, I think it's just a word that's this day and age, and I have a blast talking about it with you guys. It's fun.